parte de Puerto Rico.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Jeff and Joe's Puerto Rican Kitchen, where we show you how to make easy, authentic Puerto Rican recipes. Today we're doing another classic, carne frita, and if you guys haven't had this dish, you're missing out. Basically, carne frita are chunks of pork that are marinated in garlic and oregano and spices and then deep fried until just crispy and delicious, guys. Again, you really need to try this if you haven't already. So most traditionally, people just deep fry the carne frita. And this can work out sometimes, but I've found that oftentimes you'll end up with really dry and really tough meat, which is not so good. But Jamari's grandpa taught me a trick that I want to share with you guys, and that is, first, we're going to boil the meat. So this does two things. First, since we're going to be boiling it in a liquid that we've seasoned with garlic and oregano and adobo, all of those flavors are going to push into the meat, so you get a much more flavorful meat in the end. And second, as you're boiling it, the heat is going to break down the collagen and the fat in the meat, so that rather than being tough and chewy in the end, all of that stuff turns into kind of moist, succulent, delicious yumminess, guys. It's awesome, trust me. So here are the ingredients for our carne frita. First, we got our pork. I'm using pork butt, and I think this is the perfect cut for how we're going to do it. Again, the pork butt has a lot of fat, a lot of collagen, a lot of connective tissue, which if you just cook normally, it's going to be tough and chewy. But because we're boiling it first, it actually helps because all of this stuff melts down and just adds to the juiciness and this yumminess of the meat, guys. So I got a packet of butt country style ribs. I'm not really sure why they call them ribs, but basically they're just strips of boneless pork butt. If you got a pork butt roast, you could use that and just kind of debone it, totally up to you. Again, pork butt, and we're using 2 pounds of that. Then for the marinade, we got oregano, so a tablespoon of fresh oregano. Then we're gonna use 4 cloves of garlic, then 4 tablespoons of adobo, and 1 teaspoon of salt. You could add more pepper if you want. The adobo I'm using has a little bit, so I'm good with that, but totally optional. Then a couple other things to talk about. First, for the oregano and the garlic, I would really encourage you guys to use fresher herbs here. I think that the flavor profile is real simple, so we want to use the best ingredients we can. And then for the adobo, you might be thinking, wow, like 4 tablespoons of adobo, that's a lot of adobo. And generally you'd be right. However, because we're going to be boiling it first in water, a lot of the salt from the adobo is going to leach out into the water rather than going into the meat, so we need to over salt it so the meat is the right amount of saltiness afterwards. But that's it, guys, real simple. You're gonna love it. Let's get cooking.
You can make this recipe with a lot of different cuts of pork, but my favorite is pork butt. Pork butt tends to have a lot of collagen and intramuscular fat. This can make your pork tough if you aren't careful, but when cooked properly, it helps keep your pork moist and tender, even when you're deep frying it. I've designed this recipe for 2 pounds of boneless pork butt, so I'm just starting by weighing it out. That said, if you just want to use whatever's in the packet, just adjust the other ingredients proportionally. Once you've got your pork, the first thing you want to do is tenderize it. Here I'm using a jacquard knife, which is basically a utensil with a bunch of needles that you use to repeatedly pierce the meat. If you don't have one of these, just use a fork to stab the meat repeatedly, working side to side and turning the meat over. By repeatedly puncturing the meat, you are breaking up the muscle fibers so they won't tighten up so much when you're cooking them. Additionally, by punching holes in the meat, you are enabling the seasoning to penetrate deeper into the meat, making it more flavorful. Once your meat is tenderized, let's cut it into chunks. I generally like to keep my chunks about 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches, but feel free to cut your pieces bigger or smaller as you like. As you are cutting your meat, consider trimming off some of the bigger pieces of fat. I think that some fat on your carne frita is ideal, but you also don't want a huge chunk of it, as that might not be appetizing to your guests. Once your pork is ready, let's prepare the seasonings. First, go ahead and mince your fresh oregano. Again, I'm a big fan of fresh herbs here, but you can also use dried oregano if you want. Just use about 1/3 as much. Next, go ahead and mince your garlic. Now with all of your seasonings ready, let's combine it with our meat. Once added, stir it all together so your meat is evenly seasoned. Then cover your meat and let it marinate in the refrigerator for 30 minutes to improve the flavor. However, if you're in a rush, you can skip this step. After your meat has marinated, pull it out of the refrigerator and add it to the pot you are going to boil it in, along with 8 cups of water. Here I'm using an Instapot because I find it so easy to use. If you are using an Instapot, I like to use the meat stew setting and set it for 25 minutes. I also set the valve on the top of the pot to the sealing setting in order to speed up the cooking. If you don't have an Instapot, you can also just boil your meat on the stove. If you boil your meat on the stove, just test it from time to time and stop cooking your meat once it's tender. Once your 25 minutes of cooking time are up, go ahead and release the pressure valve and let your pot rest for about 20 minutes. This rest time does 2 things. First, it allows the pressure to release. And second, it allows your meat to cool down a little and reabsorb some of the liquid it lost while cooking. Once your meat is rested, use a strainer to remove all of your carne frita and lay it out on a tray lined with paper towel. If your carne frita is still steaming at this time, let it cool down a little bit more so it's cool enough to handle. Once cool, use another paper towel to dry off your meat. Because you are going to fry this next, you don't want there to be a bunch of water on the outside of the meat. If there is, the water will cause your frying oil to really boil up, possibly leading to the oil spilling. Additionally, it will lower the temperature of your oil, making your carne frita greasy. Now onto the frying. In a deep pot, add enough oil to completely cover your carne frita and heat it up to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. Because the meat has already been completely cooked, we want to cook it at a high temperature for a short period in order to get it nice and crispy without overcooking the inside. Once your oil hits 400 degrees, add your carne frita in batches and fry them until they are golden brown, around 3 to 4 minutes. Again, they are going to cook quickly, so just check them from time to time. Once your carne frita is golden brown, remove it from the oil and you're ready to eat. Just whip up your favorite sauce and you're ready to go. Enjoy!
So there we go, guys. Our carne frita is ready, and ooh, it looks delicious. It's all crispy. You can still, but it comes apart so easy, right? Like that's the great part about doing this way, where you boil then fry, is that you get the crispiness from the frying, but you also get that succulent tenderness from the boiling. Guys, these are so great. I highly encourage you to serve them, right out of the fryer, hot, crispy, ready to go. I like to serve them with a little mayo ketchup. Although here I actually added a little hot sauce to it. I think that's a nice kick for this if you're into that. So that's a little play on it that you can do. I think if you're gonna serve them right away, I would note that you can probably get away with putting them on paper towel. If it's gonna be a while till you actually put them out, you're probably better putting them on a metal rack. The paper towel can make them get a little bit soggy, although it's super convenient if you're serving them right away, guys. The great thing about this recipe is that it's really easy to do in advance. So after you've boiled them, pulled them out, and dried them, you can put them in the refrigerator for a couple days, perfectly fine. And then when you're gonna serve them, all you do is you pull them out. You don't need to thaw them, don't need to warm them up, nothing. Just put them in the fryer and boom, they're done. Right, again, because it's already cooked through, the fryer is just for the purpose of crisping the outside. And if anything, while they're cold, going into the fryer, you actually don't get as much cooking, so they're even more tender, right? Because you don't overcook the inside while still getting that crispy-ness on the outside. So guys, that's phenomenal. If you're gonna have people over, it's a really easy way to make it in advance, and then all you gotta do is drop it in the fryer for a couple minutes at 400, hot, real fast, and boom, done. The perfect meat, the perfect appetizer. Maybe not a dessert, but it's about good for everything else, guys. This is fabulous. I hope you try it. I hope you make it for our friends. And then I hope you guys come back again next week for another episode of Jeff and Joe's Puerto Rican Kitchen.